The cases of Paul Blackburn and Thomas Malkinson highlight some of the most egregious miscarriages of justice in recent British history. Both men were wrongly convicted and spent decades in prison for crimes they never committed. Their stories are a stark reminder of the fallibility of the legal system and the devastating impact that wrongful convictions can have on individuals and their families. And the implications of these miscarriages of justice, the broader issues of wrongful imprisonment, the deeply problematic practice of charging former inmates for, quote, their bed and board, end quote, during their time in prison, and the evidence that emerges of police complicity to put these people away, all of this paints a very disturbing image. In addition, when people have been proven to be wrongly put in prison, they then also face deductions from the money that they've been awarded, so that in the end they have a pittance of what was publicly proclaimed, or it's paid so late, so tardily, in such dribs and drabs, that they almost never see it. The only people who benefit from these cases seem to be the lawyers, and that isn't justice. That is lining our pockets. Paul Blackburn was just 15 years old when he was wrongly convicted of the attempted murder of another boy. The conviction, which led to him spending 25 years in prison, was later found to be based on fabricated evidence by the police, and the Court of Appeal eventually quashed his conviction, but the damage had been done. Blackburn lost the prime years of his life, enduring the horrors of prison for a crime he didn't commit. Upon his release, he was awarded compensation. However, the £100,000, over £100,000 was deducted from his payment to cover the costs of rent and food which he would supposedly have incurred had he been a free man. This deduction is not only financially crippling, but is morally indefensible. He had no choice, and he had no wish to take up accommodation in a prison, so he shouldn't be paying for it. Thomas Malkinson's story is equally harrowing. He was wrongly imprisoned for 17 years for a rape he didn't commit, a conviction that was eventually overturned by the Court of Appeal, and despite being cleared, Malkinson, like Blackburn, faced an uphill battle for fair compensation. The government policy that allowed deductions for living expenses was finally scrapped last year, but not before causing immense suffering to those who'd already been through so much. Malkinson's case has brought to light the urgent need for reform in how the justice system compensates those who've been wrongfully convicted. This practice of deducting bed and board costs from compensation payments is fundamentally flawed, and it represents a gross injustice. But today there's a statement that this is being upheld, that this is something that henceforth will continue to be done. It's based on the premise that individuals wrongfully imprisoned should somehow be grateful for the food and shelter provided by the state during their incarceration. And this notion is deeply offensive and ignores the fact that these individuals were imprisoned against their will, deprived of their liberty, subjected to a system that failed them. Matt Foote, the co-director of the legal charity Appeal, has described it as vindictive, adding insult to injury. And the cases of Blackburn and Malkinson also highlight the broader issues of the legal system itself, the illusion of justice. While these men were eventually exonerated, the process was excruciatingly slow, and even after being cleared, they face additional hurdles in securing the money that was promised. The deductions for legal expenses, living costs, the taxes serve to minimise the financial restitution that is owed by the state to these individuals, and effectively denying them real justice. As Andrew Malkinson himself has said, the barriers erected by the system are silly and inexcusable, serving only to protect the state's interests rather than delivering justice to those who've been wronged. And yet, I'm sure, the barristers and the legal profession is pocketing whatever it can. The cases of Blackburn and Malkinson are not isolated incidents. They're part of a larger, more troubling pattern of wrongful convictions in the UK and beyond. The fact that there are relatively low numbers of people in the same situation as Blackburn, as Matt Foote points out, should not diminish the significance of their plight. What is wrong is wrong. And each wrongful, and it makes our position when we criticise other nations and other countries for their wrongful imprisonment of individuals, it makes our position weaker morally. Each wrongful conviction represents a failure of justice and a violation of an individual's right. The possibility that there are many others wrongfully imprisoned is a sobering thought, and it underscores the need for continued vigilance and reform within the legal system. And the cases of Paul Blackburn and Thomas Malkinson, they reveal the deep flaws in the UK's justice system, but in any justice system, it always needs to be improved. And now we're thinking of getting Timpson involved, thinking of prison reform. This is a part of prison reform, isn't it? And we need to look not only about how we manage the time in prison, but how we manage the compensation for wrongful imprisonment. The practice of charging for bed and board is not only unfair, it's morally reprehensible. It perpetuates the suffering of those who have already endured the nightmare of wrongful imprisonment, and we will never know what went on in those prisons. Justice is denied if it is delayed, and in the cases of Blackburn and Malkinson, justice has been both delayed, diluted, and distorted. There's a tricolon for you. The system must be reformed to ensure that those who are wrongfully convicted are fully compensated, without deductions, without insult to their already significant injuries. The government's refusal to apply these changes retrospectively further compounds that injustice, leaving individuals like Blackburn, for example, without recourse. True justice requires more than overturning wrongful convictions. It requires an acknowledgement of the wrongs committed, compensation to the victims for the time that has been lost, and restitution. So, it's not simply about saying this is for the time that you spent imprisoned. This is what you could have earned while you were out there, not what you owe us for looking after you. And this is compensation. And we're using the word compensation as one cover-all for the whole lot. It doesn't even begin to sort it out. We do the same thing with the post office scandal. The post office scandal, we must restore the money which was paid to the post office by people who were frightened from their savings. That's restitution. Then we must compensate them for the damage done to them by the legal system. And then I think we must do something to restore their sense of dignity. There are three elements in that compensation package, and we're trying to ignore that. But to offer somebody compensation without repaying the money that you've taken, that's wrong, isn't it? And then to charge them legal fees on top of all that. No, all those legal fees should be awarded back to them and to see justice being done, where the only people who are making money out of this are in the legal system. That must be wrong. The legal system is there to serve us. And when it gets it wrong, it's doubly wrong. So in the case of the post office scandal, yeah, the legal system itself is not being questioned. In the case of Thomas Malkinson and Paul Blackburn, the legal system is the bit which is wrong. So to see the legal system pocketing the profit, barristers, judges being paid, while Malkinson and Blackburn and others are out of pocket. It's like saying to a judge, "Here's your money for this for this week. Now we're going to deduct the money for the time you spent in the halls of justice, taking up space, enjoying the warmth of the chambers, enjoying the accommodation that we provided you, enjoying the food that we offered, enjoying the company of all those people that you proclaim justice over." That's absurd, isn't it? Similarly, it's absurd to charge bed and board for being in prison. It's absurd.